G'day guys, Tillis20 here and welcome back to Marble Mountain. I've got a really big episode for you guys today. It's really quite a massive one. I changed so much in Montana and basically like restructure the whole direction of the city, which I'm going to talk about in a live play, which I'm kicking off now. So first up, this is an old save game, probably about a month and a half ago. I have been working on Marble Mountain obviously since, so this is like an older version. This is when I redid the Skyline. Obviously it's back to the old version now, so that's how far back this save game is. Now, bit of a backstory. You guys have probably seen my tutorial on the City Skylines YouTube channel where I created some realistic suburbs. They're suburbs that are going into Montana. I've actually recorded that and I'm recording this now so that I can explain the changes that I'm about to make. So there are some things that I don't like about this version of Montana, and it mainly has to do with this section here. And the reason why I wanted to redo all this is, okay, let's start with the biggest factor, and it's this big bad boy right here. This interchange is just way too big. It takes up some really valuable prime real estate where I would much prefer to have room for a stadium, like an amusement park, a zoo. There's just so much I could be putting in here, but instead I've just got this massive interchange, which I think looks quite cool, but it's really unrealistic. It doesn't make sense to have an interchange that then goes onto a bridge that is so small. And then I hate this transition here that goes into this like complete mess of an interchange that we're getting a lot of traffic and it's stuffing up a lot of my industry. And even like the whole formation of this highway doesn't make much sense. This whole area here is built around this highway, which that doesn't make much sense. I think it would make more sense to have a well-established road layout, like street network, rather than having something like this massive highway and everything being structured around it. So for instance, this area here, this suburb, I don't understand why I did it on this angle. Everything else is following a very similar grid pattern in a somewhat realistic manner, whereas this just follows its own style. And obviously like grids do that, but I think it looks really strange in this context, and it's purely just for this context. I just don't think it works. So this whole like road layout doesn't work for me, and that's one reason why I wanted to change all this. And this highway up here too, I think I like parts of it, but I think that this area here needs to be a little bit more hidden, because I just think that there's too much road going on. Basically, we want less road and more like buildings and things in Montana, whereas it's very road heavy. Another thing is this whole like terraformed area, the whole structure of the coastline. Again, it doesn't look right. As soon as I changed this and started looking at the whole of Montana, I was trying to find other references that was like similar to this, to the city landscape so that I could model it off. And I couldn't find anything that had like this massive opening for a river and that was like quite similar to Montana. And the reason why I couldn't find it is because this doesn't really exist in real life. So usually if there's like a river going inland, there will be some sort of peninsula that would kind of block this area off, because you can imagine this is ocean over here. There'll just be like massive waves just coming right into this area and making these docks pretty much unusable unless there was some sort of sea break. And I don't have room for a sea break. So I really needed to completely redo this. And on top of that, I also wanted to change where the Bay Bridge was, because I think it's, as much as I want it to be like a massive feature of Montana, I think that is just I just don't think that works in that location. Plus, this whole area here is actually just massively steep You know, that is just a mountain meets the ocean, and of course that is like normal in some areas. It is just too drastic, so I need to like flatten this out a little bit more. So you can kind of see how everything just needed a massive update. And to be honest, this is something that I've always planned in Montana, and I had always planned to redo this in some way or another. I didn't expect it to be as big of a change as I end up doing. So huge changes in this episode. Sorry, another thing I wanted to mention is because this is like such a huge focus on industry in this series, we need like a dock in Montana. We need some sort of shipyard as well, because I think that makes a lot more sense to have something like that in the capital of this whole region. So I just didn't have any room for that. Do you see what I mean? We just like have so much to restructure in Montana, and they're all just such positive things because I'm really happy with how everything looks at the end. Another thing I wanted to change as well is another good reason why we needed this change is the light rail network doesn't make any sense. So basically there's this line that goes around here, there's like a line that does a loop in the city, which apparently light rail doesn't do, which I now realize light rail doesn't really make a loop. It makes a journey to one end and then goes to another spot. The way that this is structured at the moment means that I can't really justify having any light rail traveling around these sort of locations. Basically there's this one here, one snakes its way around here. It's just a complete mess. This new way that I restructure the road layout and all the suburbs makes so much sense. I'm really excited to show you all the changes that I make. So let's get into the time lapse. So kicking things off, I am going through and using MoveIt to basically bulldoze a whole bunch of stuff that I built in the very first episodes of Marble Mountain. I believe I built this suburb in episode 3, but I might be wrong. When I built this suburb, I built it around the interchange, which in hindsight doesn't make much sense because highways generally in most cities come after the general road layout has already been established. It's usually an after creation in a city, not something that suburbs are usually built around. Obviously there are exceptions when there are like planned communities or there are purpose-built suburbs that are sort of built as a giant suburb from the get-go. But an interchange so close to the downtown of the city doesn't really make much sense to have just one suburb that is built around it. So this layout makes a lot more sense in the general sense of the road structure, which is something that I'm really very particular about. And looking at Marble Mountain with this road layout for all these months has always drove me just a little bit crazy because I've always wanted to change it. I've just never really tackled this project yet. And when I did the tutorial for the City Skylines YouTube channel, that was a really good excuse to tackle this project. So that's sort of the reason why I am tackling it in this time right now. So first up, I am just trying to figure out where I do want the connections to be, because as you can see, there are a lot of the roads and a lot of the highways still connect up quite nicely, and I'm using those roads to basically establish where the rest of the new roads are going to come into place. And there are a couple more suburbs that I'm going to lead. So there's actually that suburb just down there near the coastline that I will be yeah, there it goes. Just got demolished. I will be rebuilding that at some stage. And you can also see how it starts with one area that I want to change, and then it's kind of like when you start painting your like a room in your house, and then all of a sudden you're going to paint the hallway, and then you're going to paint the living room, and then by the time you've finished, you've painted the outside of the house. It's really one of those projects that I had just really expanded. And I also mentioned in the live play that this new road network, this new way I'm structuring Montana is going to open up a lot more opportunities to create some more interesting projects and do some more interesting builds. I'm actually going to kick that off in the next episode, where I'm going to be building something that people have been suggesting for a really long time, and that's a stadium. People have been begging me to build a stadium. I think I get about 3 comments every episode, and I've been holding off building a stadium for quite a while because I knew that I was going to build this whole area up in a different way. So it's really nice being able to have more room in Montana, because the old structure of the road layouts just was really limiting, and I didn't have enough room to really expand the way that I wanted to. So I'm mostly just going to be focusing on the suburbs today, and as I've already released the tutorial for how to build realistic suburbs, which is essentially me building this area just in about 5 minutes rather than 25, which I'm going for right now. I'm not going to show you all the footage that I did for that build. Instead, if you want to go and check out the suburbs that I end up placing down in this build, then go and check out that video, which I've linked in the description below. This episode, I'm just going to focus on the terraforming and the road layouts that I'm going to be building, and then the cinematics will actually show you everything that gets changed. So you will see all those suburbs that get placed down. You're just not going to see me build them, and I've done that because, you know, I don't really want to show you things that I've already built before. So what I've done so far is I ended up extending out the peninsula. I've extended out the peninsula so that it gives me a little bit more room to build with. I also wanted to change the mouth of the river because that was really unrealistic. I didn't like the way that it just connected up to the ocean like that. So instead I've built out this headland that gives me a little bit more room to extend out the highway. So now I'm going to have the Bay Bridge. It's going to act more like the Golden Gate Bridge, where it's a bit more out of the city, but you can still see the city skyline from multiple different angles, and particularly if you're going across the bridge, you'd still get some really nice views. So that Bay Bridge is going to connect from that extended bit that I just created, and it'll connect up to the other side of the river. So generally the same idea as before, but this time just further out of the city. And you also just saw me place down a interchange that is a real work in progress at this stage. I really just wanted to put it down just so the highway's connected, and then I'm going to be playing with it in it'll have its own episode where I extend it out. I'll change a couple of the directions for some of the off-ramps, and I'll spruce it up quite a lot. And I've placed it in a really strategic spot because I also wanted it to connect up to the docks, which you just saw me place down a little bit of not just a little bit of an area, it's actually a pretty substantial spot where I want to be placing down the docks. This is going to be the Seaport for Montana. It's most likely going to be a little bit smaller than what I created it, and it's not going to be exactly that size, but I just wanted to figure out whereabouts I wanted to place it, and we'll get to it at some stage. We'll end up working around there. I actually really like where it's placed. It makes a lot of sense because it's at the perfect distance away from the downtown of Montana, but it's not too far away, and it will be also close to the mouth of the river, which I think also makes sense. I'll probably have to create some sort of sea break, so that we're not getting too many waves around there, and I will have to extend the network for the ships so that we do get some cargo ships coming in and out around here. But generally around this area, I do want it to create a industrial area, and a couple of the neighborhoods around here too are going to be like really dodgy, a little bit more because they're going to be closer to the industrial areas. There's also going to be a lot of the highways that are going to be around here too. So I've got like a really good idea of the sort of neighborhoods that I want around the docks, around the port, and then I'm also thinking that around this headland I will also have like a very small suburb that is probably one of the last suburbs for Montana as we get further out of the city. And this suburb is going to be quite disconnected from the rest of the city. I'm thinking that this headland that I'm creating will be quite naturey with some more nature walks and a lot more trees, and we'll probably create it into a national park. But what I'm showing you right now is just some cinematics of the general road layout of what I've been creating. It's yeah, I think this road layout makes a lot of sense in terms of the direction of the streets, in terms of the main roads that I'm using, and it just gives us so much more room to expand. So even where I have suburbs mapped out, some of them will probably end up being redeveloped into maybe parks or schools or you know, something else that might pop up and be more interesting than a suburb. But it just really gives us a lot more opportunity to expand. So for this last little bit of the time lapse, I am just showing you like the general layout for the suburbs and what I was generally going for. So the suburbs closer to the downtown, they're a little bit more detailed than the rest of the suburbs in Montana. Yeah, I actually really like the style that I end up creating. Again, if you wanted to see this in more detail, then go and check out the video on the City Skylines YouTube channel, because I go into more detail about how I create these types of suburbs. But I really like these back streets that I create, because they create so much more atmosphere. They give a real Los Angeles vibe, which you guys know that I'm totally obsessed with. In a lot of my other series too, I generally build in that sort of a genre. But these back streets are really cool, and a lot of people use them too. So you actually see quite a lot of people walking up and down them. Unfortunately, no cars drive up them, but yeah, they still look quite cool. And I'm also just playing with a couple of education assets, because I wanted to increase the I want to increase a couple of things. I want to increase the education around here, because we actually have quite a lot of uneducated Sims, unfortunately, and not very many people are going to the university. So I decided that we needed to have a bit of a focus on education. So placing down some schools, and you saw me play with a library as well, which is such a nice looking asset. And for all you veteran watchers out there, some of you probably recognize this technique that I'm doing with these apartment blocks. Does anyone recognize this? Because this is something I did probably about a year and a half ago with Springwood. I created, oh, it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be about 2 years. I think I did this exact technique. And these are vanilla buildings, but when you create this block of apartment buildings like I'm doing, so pretty much using Mover to copy and paste them into this square shape, they make a really nice block of units that I think are really iconic with a lot of cities, and particularly Marble Mountain in Montana. I think this fits in really nicely. So yeah, I did this ages and ages ago in Springwood, and they fit in just as well in Montana, and I'm probably going to copy and paste these over into some other locations in Montana, because we all know that we see the same types of apartment blocks pretty much everywhere in cities. But guys, that is pretty much it for this episode. If you have any suggestions for things that I should add with all this extra space in Montana, then hit me up in the comments section below, and yeah, we'll start adding them in over the next couple of weeks. There's so many options, there's so many great ideas that you guys have been suggesting, so if you've already mentioned something before, maybe hit me up again just in case I've forgotten. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.